Welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall. You're looking at video of a protest in Tel Aviv today. People have been taking to the streets regularly in Tel Aviv in an effort to demand the release of hostages in Gaza. This comes as Hamas released a video this morning showing signs of life from a 19-year-old Israeli hostage named Liri Albag. We will not show the video on our air. It's the latest in a series of clips that the terrorist group has released of Israeli captives taken in the October 7th attack. Retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer is standing by. Hal, why is it that Hamas releases videos like this? What do they get out of it?
Austin, it's basically psychological warfare, psychological operations. They're basically playing to the domestic audience in Israel. The protests that you see on the streets are exactly what they want to see happen. They want to see those things occur. It's a way of negotiating in public. It's putting pressure on Netanyahu and his administration to come to terms, to accelerate the negotiation process for a ceasefire. And so this is just one of those things that was all timed based on whatever's happening, and we don't have all the details of what's happening with the negotiations behind closed doors, but I'm sure that if I was part of that, I would probably look at that and say, okay, this is exactly why you released that video. Now, by the way, it's a 19-year-old teenage girl that's being held hostage. That's not coincidental. They're trying to play on heartstrings. By the way, in the video, she says it's been about 450 days. We don't know. That could be 450 days. They could have theoretically done that, 100 days ago or 200 days ago, and just had her say that. With the hostages, a lot of them, they're held underground. They have no sense of day or night in many cases, so they are completely reliant on basically their hostage takers for whatever information is going on in the outside world. They're being brainwashed. One thing that a number of people watching the video, psychiatrists and who have seen it, is they can see the clear emotional and psychological distress that she must be under, and all the hostages are under. The lack of sensory input of day and night and everything else. That just and of course having any interaction with any substantive interaction with anybody, that just wears down on somebody. We see that in prisons all the time. That's why there's rules about how long they can keep someone in isolation, and they're essentially in isolation is what it is. So yeah, it's this is psychological warfare is what it is.
Hal, sometimes when these hostage videos are released, they have a hostage say a recent news story in order to prove that it was recorded recently. In this case, they didn't do that.
Raise alarm bells to me.
Yeah.
Which is she still alive? They could have done a series of things some time back where they saw hostages were having health problems or severe psychological problems, or there was some other reason, and they had them pre-record a number of these videos, throwing out dates, but there was no way of verifying. The traditional thing with, for example, kidnappings will be that the hostage will hold up traditionally would hold up a newspaper. And the newspaper would have a date and, of course, a big article that was for that day, whatever the headline is. And that was a proof of life thing to show that the hostage was still alive, the kidnapped victim was still alive. None of that in this one. By the way, it's interesting, none of the major news outlets in Israel are showing this video either. And that is based on ethical, moral grounds and not to help Hamas with their psychological warfare operation. So it's having less effect, although it does get out there, and certainly it gets out on the internet. People can click on it, they can watch it. So obviously there's a number of people that, even though the traditional news media isn't covering it, they are seeing it that's going on out there. But this is also, the timing of this it coincides with massive operations by Israel, ground operations, airstrikes. I think since January 1st, there's been 40 strike operations in the Gaza Strip. And so the war continues, if you will. Yep. The military operations continue. And that's another reason they're putting us out there. They're trying to put pressure on Israel to curtail some of his strike operations, because frankly, other things that they've done haven't had much success.
There's been no shortage of activity in Gaza. Trey Yingst saying, in fact, that there's been an uptick in rocket fire from Gaza over the past couple of days. This week marks 15 months since the war began. Hal, at this point in the war, do you find it incredible that they're actually still able to fire long-range rockets out of Gaza at this point in the war?
It really is interesting to see. Here they are, over 450 days in the war, and they're still able to run out there, which is literally run out in the street and fire these missiles into Israeli territory. Of course, Israel's got drones flying over. They've got air cover over. They've got what we would call counter battery fire, which is mortars and artillery and rockets that they can fire at these systems once they spot them. But Hamas is still able to do that. Another thing that coincides with this is there's a report out that Hamas has actually had improvements in their recruiting efforts, of all things. So as Israel is basically causing heavy attrition with Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad fighters, they are recruiting new members. Obviously, they can't really train them much. They are essentially going to be low-grade fodder, if you will, for Hamas and doing whatever operations they are doing. So their life expectancy on the battlefield will be very short. However, it does say something about how Hamas is still able to bring people in to fight for it, and it makes it tough from a counterinsurgency standpoint. You're trying to cause battle damage, you're trying to cause attrition of their forces, and yet they're able to regenerate. At least in this case, their ground fighters are able to regenerate them at a certain level, which will prolong the war. But that also may be another reason they're pushing really hard right now to get a ceasefire in place, is because they're probably looking at the long term and saying, look, if we don't get this done, there won't be anything to negotiate. There will be no Hamas left that can negotiate. And frankly, from Israel's standpoint, they made it very clear Hamas will not have any role in a future government. They're not going to control any territory. They're not going to be allowed to exist as a military organization. So Hamas is, it's been a rather dismal end state for them ever since they decided to do the attack on October 7th. They truly underestimated the will, I think, of the Israeli government and the Israeli people. That they crossed the line, and Israel, despite all the destruction in Gaza, despite all the international condemnation for military in such a confined space, causing so many casualties, particularly a number of civilian casualties, men, women, children, across the board. Despite all of that, Israel has continued its operations there. And I think Hamas at this point has no illusions that they're going to suddenly be able to play internal politics to a heavy degree within Israel using traditional means. So now they're using these things like this, hauling out this teenage girl and putting her on a video, because I think they're just plain getting desperate, grasping at straws, anything that they can do to change the dynamic of what's happening with those ceasefire negotiations.
Al, we'll leave it at that for now. Have a good weekend. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Austin.